Hey guys, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Welcome back to my channel. So it is time for another 30 inks 30 days. So if you guys were around for the last time I did 30 inks 30 days, I organized it into 4 separate videos because I really just don't have the bandwidth to be able to upload videos every day. But I really liked the way that I did it, but there was also a few of you that gave me really good feedback on the way that I did it. So I'm just going to go over where I'm going to keep track of 30 inks 30 days. So the first place will be in my B6 Galen leather notebook, which has 52 GSM Tomoe River paper. So I will keep track of all the inks here, and I made sure to count that there was 30. And then I will keep track of the first week along with the ink splotches, second week, third week, and fourth week. So that will all be in here. The next place I will also keep track of it is in my journal. However, many of you pointed out, and I apologize for that, that this is only 25 days, but this is only for my own reference. And then each day in my Hobonichi A5 journal, I will use the ink, color, and pen for corresponding to that day. And it will look something like this, or with the ink splotches like that. So it gives me the opportunity to use it there. The other place I'm also going to use it is with transcribing Anne of Green Gables. And this was really successful for me back when I did it in June. So I'm hoping it is successful now. So I'm gonna try to do a page a day. If not, if I really like how it's working out, then maybe 2 pages per ink, but we'll see. These 3 places, so the B6 Galen leather notebook, the transcribing, as well as my journal, give me 3 separate places that I can use the pen and ink combination, so I can use it really in the best way for me possible. All right, so we're going to go over days 1 through 7, and then the next video will be days 8 through, I believe it's 15, and so on and so forth. So let's get started. Day 1's ink is Ferris Wheel Press Queen Allium, and this was a recent purchase actually from PenChalet. And that little pen sample ink vial holder is from Fountain Pendulum. I'll link her in the description below. And here is the beautiful pen from Atelier Lusso that I purchased at the San Francisco Pen Show. So I'm just going to make sure that I shake up that sample vial a little bit to make sure that the shimmer is spread evenly. And I thought that as part of this video that I would include me filling up the pen as best as I can remember to take a video of it. Sometimes I forget, but you see I'm not filling it in or filling up the converter all the way. I only want to fill it maybe like halfway or even a third of the way, because that's all I'll need it for. Next, in my B6 Galen leather notebook, oops, shook the camera there, I have a grid here which will house all of the inks for 30 days, and I put a little drop with a pipette, and then I swirl it around with a sample ink vial and then write the name. And this is a great way for me to see all of the inks for 30 inks 30 days in one place. Once again, look at how beautiful this pen is. Oh, so pretty. And then the next place I put it is actually just a weekly summary where I do a little rectangle to show the color, but also how wet the ink is. I always wondered why you do a rectangle versus like any type of other ink swatch, and it really shows, I think, the fast writing with the ink and how wet it is, things like that. So then writing the name, Ferris Wheel Press Queen Allium, and I really love this ink, this mauve with the gold shimmer. It's such an attractive ink. And I have it in my Atelier Lusso Karina 15 Hepalua Abalone. It's a very long name for a pen. And this has an extra fine nib, I believe. No, it's a fine nib. And actually, with the Ferris Wheel Press ink, it performed really well. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually decorate my page. This is in the Hobonichi A5 notebook with Tomoe River paper. So I'm decorating it with the back of it's not even a glass dip pen, it's my calligraphy pen that my husband found at a thrift shop. And this is where I'm going to be transcribing Anne of Green Gables. Everybody does something a little differently when it comes to 30 inks, 30 days. Some use it for journaling, which I'm going to show you here shortly. Some transcribe, and some just do art. And so there is no specific rule when it comes to 30 inks, 30 days. Basically, just try out a different pen ink combination every day. So here I am in my Hobonichi Cousin doing the sandwich bag method. I just put a few splotches with a pipette or a few drops of the ink with the pipette down onto the paper, and then I use the sandwich bag to swirl it around and get a very unique swatch swatch effect. And it really shows off the different shading and sheening properties and shimmer properties as well. So here I am, actually it's a different table because we are in Jasper and in Hinton, so I'm just showing my journaling. I'm journaling on the bedside table, and it was a very uncomfortable position, but I wanted to show how this performed and how I was even writing in my journal while still away on vacation. Oh, I love this pen so much. It's such a good hefty pen, and I think it's the perfect match for this ink. The gold shimmer, the mauve, and the purple, it's all just so beautiful. So then now looking at the ink, you can see that beautiful gold shimmer, and even in the first bit of writing, you see still quite a bit of that gold shimmer, and even maybe for like the first quarter of the writing, but the shimmer kind of lessens as the writing goes on, which makes sense because the shimmer kind of settles in the pen, but so you have to agitate the pen a little bit to get some shimmer throughout the writing sample. And then here is the ink swatch on my Hobonichi Cousin. But overall, I really love the color of this ink. It performed really well in my new Atelier Lusso, and that is day 1 of 30 Inks, 30 Days with Queen Allium. The ink for day 2 is BirminghamPenCo Cherry Blossom, and this one was sent to me by Pam, an old lady with a camera, and then she also gave me a second sample at the San Francisco Pen Show, and this is inked in my BirminghamPenCo with the Pepto nib. There is no name for this blank. It was actually from a subscription from, can't remember. Basically, Jim said that the blank came from a subscription and there was no specific name for it. So I'm putting a drop here on my B6 Galen leather notebook, and I then swirl it around with my ink sample vial. And I really like this method of putting all of the inks in a grid like this. It definitely allows me to see all of the inks in one place. Now I'm doing my sandwich bag method on my Hobonichi Cousin, and I love this method for journaling. It's such an easy way to decorate your journal without adding a ton of bulk, but then you still get the really lovely crinkling of all the pages once you're done. So beautiful. And then now here I am in Jasper also doing some journaling while on vacation, and just look at how well this pen and ink write together. It's such a great flowing ink. It's got wonderful shading, and in this extra fine nib, this extra fine nib was actually tuned by Jim himself of BirminghamPenCo. Really beautiful combination. So then now I'm in my Hobonichi A5 notebook where I'm transcribing Anne of Green Gables, and I decided to do a different type of design rather than a circle or an ink splotch. I kind of wanted to do designs with the back of this calligraphy pen, and I've seen other people do this as well. So I'm thinking of other ways to incorporate different types of artwork within 30 Inks, 30 Days. I'm thinking maybe for days 8 through 15, attempt doing a different flower using paintbrushes, so fountain pen ink painting with each one. I'm really liking the process for transcribing as well. For one, it really allows me to use the pen and ink combination because I'll be using it in my Hobonichi Cousin, so at least one page of writing there, and then within my A5 notebook I'm using 1 to 2 pages depending on how much ink is in the converter, but also how well I like the combination. And this ink, this cherry blossom, is just gorgeous. It shades really well. It's got beautiful flow, and even in an extra fine nib, you can see how wet this ink is. It's not dry at all. I really liked this pen and ink combination, and I highly recommend it. And I definitely would consider using this for longer than a day next time. But look at this beautiful color here, and even in the swatches, the way that the ink pooled is just stunning. I thought this was a really great combination, and I loved using this, and I really did want to use it for longer. So that's BirminghamPenCo Cherry Blossom. Day 3, and we have Wearingeul Moby Dick. So just placing a blob dot on my B6 Galen leather notebook and swirling it around with the sample ink vial. If you guys don't know this method, this was inspired by Leanne Likes. She actually does this with a little silver ramekin dish, and she gets much bigger circles, and I like the smaller circles with the sample ink vial. So this is paired with the Navalor or the Narwhal Tromso. It's such a gorgeous, gorgeous pen with that rose gold nib. And this nib actually is quite smooth and it's a wet writer, but the two combined are not my favorite. Spoiler alert, it's not my favorite. Even when I'm writing here, it was a struggle. It felt like the ink was too light. It struggled coming out of the pen. Not that the ink was dry, but it just felt like the two together, it was hard starting. It was already, I wasn't enjoying that. So this was kind of foreshadowing that day. So then placing a few drops and then doing my sandwich bag method. And this method was actually inspired by Clarissa of the Snowy Studio, so definitely go check out her Instagram because her sandwich bag art is gorgeous. And then putting a few dots down at the bottom as well. For me, the trick is not to try and put too much ink, because if you put too much ink, then the distinction between the different blobs, I guess, isn't as defined. You don't get like those really thin, pretty lines. You just get blobs. So then here I am again in my notebook using the back of the calligraphy pen to create these cool designs. And the reason that I use this is because, one, it's easy to clean up and wash off, but two, it's a really, really smooth method of creating these designs. And what I do for each page here is write down the name of the ink as well as the name of the pen. And I try to transcribe at least one day, or one page, or 2 pages. My goal was to transcribe 2 pages in this notebook. I mean, the color is fantastic, really, really fantastic. But for this particular pen ink combination, I could only do 1 page. Not because the pen was uncomfortable. The pen was beautiful to write with. It's just the ink and pen together were not my favorite. It felt like it came out of the pen very light and not pigmented enough. And you could see there's a little bit of a lighter section, and I'm not sure if that's the ink itself, but I mean, in the ink swatches, it's beautiful, really good. And I think this would be great in fountain pen ink paintings, but the writing sample just, I wasn't a big fan of it. So probably not my favorite combination. Great for art, but not for writing. Day 4, we have Wearingeul, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. My most recent PenChalet order was very Wearingeul heavy, so this 30 inks 30 days may be very Wearingeul heavy. And here is my Pelikan 140, my only vintage fountain pen, and this is a piston filler, but also has a 14 karat gold nib, which is a beautiful flexible nib. So then putting a little drop there in my 30 days grid and swirling it with the sample ink vial. I really like this method because I'm not using cotton buds. I'm not contaminating the ink sample in any way. And this is really, really easy to clean. So, I mean, with cotton buds, I felt like I was being very wasteful, but I was also really aware that the fibers from the cotton buds could be getting into the ink sample vial as well, and I didn't want that. So then doing my little listing in the square, and this pen is such a wet writer, and I was so glad I paired the two because this nib, I mean, Pelikan nibs in general are very wet, but this was just such a joy to write with. And I had to look there, is this an EF or an F? But it is an extra fine, and this has a little bounce and a little flex to it as well, so it was really a joy to write with. So here in my Hobonichi Cousin for journaling, I tried to do these ahead of time, but with being on vacation and then getting ready for my new releases coming out, these first 7 days were very stressful for me. A lot of people film daily videos for their 30 inks 30 days, and I'm basically filming snippets where I can. And I also don't randomly choose my ink and pen pairings as well. I have a whole spreadsheet where I've already planned out my pen and ink pairing. So it doesn't have to be random. The 30 inks, 30 days really is what you want it to be. If you want to experiment with the different pen and ink pairings and use up the samples that you've got, great. And that is, for me, the goal of 30 inks, 30 days is to use up, or at least try out, more than just swatching all the samples that I do have. And the way that I'm doing that is through doing it in my B6 Galen leather notebook, by journaling in my Hobonichi cousin, and here as well, transcribing Anne of Green Gables. So it gives me a little bit more opportunity to use the pen in just one day, and it allows me to get through a lot more pen and ink combinations in the span of a month. And I really like that about 30 inks, 30 days. And then at the end of the 30 inks, 30 days, I'll basically look at all of the ink samples that I've tried. Like this one is stunning, absolutely stunning. I love this green and it shades beautifully. But what I want to do at the end of 30 inks, 30 days is look at the samples that I've tried and look at them and say, okay, do I still want to explore any of these inks further, or am I happy with how I've used them and am I able to let them go? So at the end of these 30 inks, 30 days, I will probably have let go of most of them, because I feel like I've used them to, and I've explored them in the amount that I've wanted to. But isn't this gorgeous? I mean, yes, there is some bleed through from the next page, but this is Wearingeul, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Day 5, and we have Laban Demeter. So Laban inks, I've tried a few of them, and they have a collection named after, gods from Greek mythology. And I love Greek mythology. It was one of my favorite subjects in, elementary, but I also took a couple of university courses in it as well, and I loved it. But here I am filling it up in my Laban Taroko. So I thought I would pair the brown ink with the brown Laban pen, and I think this pairing turned out really well. Now, you guys know how I feel about brown inks. I'm kind of meh about brown inks. So I'm really trying to encourage myself to use the brown inks that I do have, just to use them. And I think once I'm done, I will probably either give this sample away or send it away to somewhere. But I'm glad that I've at least used it. But the pairing of these two, I do have to say, it's a very wet flow. Well, I say not very wet, but it's like the perfect wet flowing ink for me. And this is such a smooth, fine nib in the Laban Taroko that the two together just wrote so beautifully well. And then swatching it in my Hobonichi cousin, yes, it's shadowed and there's a tiny bit of bleed through to the other page, but it wasn't so bad that it really affected the overall experience of it. But what I like about this particular method is that it really shows off the shading. Like, look at that. And then once it dries, you're gonna see here, well, let me do the bottom first, but once it dries, you're really gonna see the different shading properties of this brown. And in a writing sample, a brown looks very flat, whereas if you're doing swatching like this, you do get to see a few more properties of the ink, which is what I like about this. So now I'm going to be swirling it around using the back of my calligraphy pen. My husband found this pen at Value Village, or at a charity shop. He was just wandering around one day and he was like, ooh, my wife might like this. And I actually really like the calligraphy part. It's a flexi type of nib. I don't use it that often, but it's been fun to use while I've had it. So with transcribing, why did I choose Anne of Green Gables? I think one, because the book, I had the book, but two, it was a book that I read when I was a child and I really loved it. And now I'm trying to get my daughter into the whole series, and my daughter has the whole series of these books. I don't know if I'll get through the whole series, but at least I like rereading this. But for this brown, I still have the same feelings about brown. It looks flat to me in the writing sample, but when you look at the swatch, it really is very, very pretty. Will I keep this for future use? Probably not, but I'm glad that I did use Laban Demeter. Day 6, we have Private Reserve Blue Suede in my Esterbrook Esty Nouveau Blue. And I thought that this was a really good match until I realized that this actually isn't really blue. It's more like a teal or a turquoise, but it's still such a pretty ink. Like once I lift this up, look at that. It's more of a teal turquoise or lighter blue, and it doesn't match exactly, but it was still fun to use. And actually, now that I'm watching this back, there are like the lighter bits of blue in the pen, so I could see where it could match. Never mind, maybe it does match, I don't know. But here I am putting it down as part of the list for days 1 through 7, and already I love this. The ink flowed beautifully, and it's a very smooth fine nib in this Esterbrook Esty. And then going into my Hobonichi Cousin, this ink swatched beautifully, and I say the word beautifully a lot. I need to find more more describing words, more descriptive words, but the shading in this is very, very out. It's just striking, the shading in this. Once it dries, you can see how the ink pools, and there's a little bit of red sheen as well. But also just the two together, it was such a fun pairing. Blue is not a color that I use often, which is why I like 30 inks 30 days, because I get the opportunity to use inks that I wouldn't normally use, and it allows me to, I think Simone said this, is that 30 inks 30 days allows her to use inks that she would have normally been afraid to commit to for a whole month. And I really like that I can use these inks for a day, and if I want to explore them more, I can. But if I feel like that day was enough for me to fully explore the ink, then I've done it. I've used the ink to, for my purpose. But look at how beautiful this is. And now that I'm actually seeing the pen and ink together, yes, they do match. They do match. What was I thinking? They do match really, really well. And the combination of this pen and ink, I really liked these two together. But I mean, look at that little swirl there, and then the pooling of the ink in the swatches. Another great combination. I'm so glad I tried Private Reserve Blue Suede. Day 7 is Noodler's Matahari Cordial, and this sample was sent to me by Shazia of Bleskett, Canada, and I am putting it in my tailored PenCo Honeycomb Honey Melomel. That is a mouthful. I had this pen custom made beginning of the year, I think. I think it was commissioned in February, and I didn't get it until April, but I thought these two were a very, very great pairing together. Now, on a personal note, I'm not one really for Noodler's inks. I am not really a fan of, things that have happened with the owner of the company. I won't get into that right now, but the thing with this particular ink as well is that some of the Noodler's inks have a little smell to them. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's the way it's manufactured. But I do have to say the color is really lovely, and I thought it was a good match for this pen. And this ink had really, really great flow with this fine nib. And the fine nib on this pen is very smooth. I do have to say, though, that I am considering selling this pen. It is a beautiful pen, and I'm glad that I had it in my collection, but I feel like I've outgrown it. I don't know. Is there ever a pen that you have in your collection that you've outgrown, where your tastes have changed and it's not something that you feel fits your collection anymore? I feel like that's kind of happened with this pen. But anyway, swatching in my Hobonichi Cousin, and I actually really like the effect of the Private Reserve Blue Suede shadowing through. It creates a really good contrast between the Noodler's Matahari Cordial and the blue and the teal. So it's an unintended design element of the swatching. And then for journaling, I haven't added as many pictures to my journals recently, and I really should get back into doing that. But by swatching, it allows me to, one, journal with that pen and ink combination. And it's a way of documenting my 30 inks 30 days is by journaling with each pen every day. And then here I am doing my swirls with the back of the pen. I really like this effect, and I can't remember where I saw this. I feel like mine look very, very amateur compared to some others who have been doing that swirl for a very long time, but I really like the effect. And I'm thinking maybe for days 8 through 15, like I said earlier, trying to do flower paintings with fountain pen ink. But looking here closely at the color, it is a really pretty ink. A really pretty ink and a great match for this pen. Do I feel like I need to further explore this ink? I don't think so. I think for the purposes of 30 inks, 30 days, I've used what I can out of this ink, and I've explored it to what I've wanted. It really is pretty, but not one that I would keep for the future. So that's Noodler's Matahari's Cordial. Alright, so there are all of the pen and ink combinations for days 1 through 7, and I'll show you here quickly as well my ink swatches. So if you are not following me on Instagram, basically what I'm doing is I'm doing videos of these daily swatches with my sandwich paper bag method. It's not my sandwich paper bag method, but it's just a fun way to get these different designs, and I really like the way that these turned out. It's like its own little art piece. So in terms of the favorite ink and pen combinations, let's do it in two different things here. So my favorite ink, regardless of what the pen is, my favorite ink out of all of these 7 days is Ferris Wheel Press Queen Allium. That purple is just stunning, and then that gold shimmer, love it. However, in terms of combined with the Atelier Lussault Hepalua, or the Carina, it's a beautiful pen, but I think this nib needs a little bit of tuning, or maybe it's just the combination with the shimmers. So great ink, but not necessarily the best writing experience. In terms of my favorite pen and ink combination, I really liked the PenChalet with the BirminghamPenCo Cherry Blossom. They wrote beautifully, but I also really liked the Esterbrook SD Nouveau Blue with the Private Reserve Blue Suede. I liked writing with those two. You know what? I really liked writing with the Laban Taroko Pinnacle as well. And it was nice to actually get this back because I haven't used that pen in a while. My least favorite combination was the Wearingeul Moby Dick with the Navalor Voyage Tromso. It's a gorgeous pen, but with that ink, it's too light. It felt like it went down really light, not saturated enough, and when I thought it was, no, it didn't work. It's basically what I'm trying to say. It's not that it's a dry ink, it was just not saturated enough for my liking. It would go down really light, and it made me feel like I had to press down harder with the nib, which I know not to do. But then it dried only just a little bit more saturated. It's beautiful for ink swatches and for fountain pen ink painting, but I didn't really enjoy writing with it in the fine nib in that. All right, but that is it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts below on this format, doing it in days 1 through 7. I am a little bit stressed out because I am a little bit behind. I'm filming this before I've even done all of the transcribing, but I just wanted to get the summary done here. And I commend all of those people who are doing the daily videos because I don't have the bandwidth for that, but I'm hoping you guys like this format too. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and have yourselves a great day.